Hey there, YouTube's Chris Holman here. This is the next video in the philosophy series. I have with me my good friend Sebastian. We're going to discuss today life from a philosophical standpoint. So I'm going to give Sebastian here an opportunity to introduce himself.
Sebastian Tides. It is a fact that as a child I prayed to God for wisdom. That may have been possibly because I had a fear of not measuring up as a person. I felt like that taking that to God was maybe the wisest decision I made in my life. But ever since, I have been deeply interested in both secular philosophy and how it relates to theology. I, in fact, actually came to subscribe fully to my Christian faith because on my journey as a pedestrian philosopher, I found that it made sense. Everything that I had come to discern as a pedestrian philosopher fit into the wisdom that God shares in the Bible. So I'm a Christian philosopher. I'm a little bit out there. I think about everything. The meaning of life, the purpose of life, what it means to be a man, what duty is, how to explain to man God's law, because sometimes God's law is difficult for people to accept, and I think part of the reason for that is because God possessing all knowledge and wisdom is not always the principles or the reasons why God makes His law is not always easily understood by man. It takes somebody with a gift of discernment to be able to articulate to his fellow man why God has certain laws.
Very good, very good. So now, you have brought with you notebooks and things that you have written.
I brought everything.
You brought everything.
I had no idea what we were going to talk about today.
So if you could just kind of go over just real quick, just explain what is it that you brought with you today.
This is a collection of all of the thoughts that I felt like were important that I've had in the last 3 years since God healed me. I used to be agoraphobic. I used to have really bad anxiety problems. My life was actually completely unmanageable. I am not sure exactly what change happened in me, but I can tell you that I'm thankful to God and that I've been through some bad situations in my life. I have basically not only written down my thoughts on theology, I've written down my thoughts on all kinds of things, everything from the outlandish to the plausible. I've tried to make discernments about what's probably true using inductive reasoning. That's sort of, inductive reasoning is sort of what is probably true based on evidence or based on things that we do know.
Right.
And I've just trying to put together the entire size of life and all of its facets. I examine the meaning of life, which I actually couldn't figure out. I prayed to God for the answer to that, and I'm absolutely indebted to tell you that I asked God for the meaning of life because I promised God if He gave me the meaning of life, I would give Him credit for giving it to me whenever I told people the meaning of life.
Okay. So what everything that you've got here was, would you say that, would you then say that this was inspired or either given to or inspired by God?
A lot of it is inspired by God, but a lot of it is my own interest.
Yeah.
For example, I talk about what kind of different testimonies people give about their near-death experience. why some of them are different. I use an idea in calculus called approaching a limit to examine different thought experiments. Like for example, one outlandish thing that I think about is what if the world was flat? What kind of evidence do we have about the world being flat or about it being round? My conclusion is that the world is round, but I do these thought experiments to sort of come to more probable conclusions about things. For example, are aliens real? There's two different limits you can approach. Either 100% of all testimony and evidence is bullshit,
Right.
which means that says something about the human ability to make up stuff. And then the other limit is if only one testimony is true, then that means there's someone else out there. So just
Right.
different thought experiments like that. You take it into that context.
Okay.
You make a decision for yourself based on that.
Right.
Is 100% of it all baloney, or is it probably true that at least one is real? And it's things like that. It's things about near-death experience, things about different virtues,
Right.
and some of them are really simple exercises. Some of them are more like conundrums. They're
Right.
still works in progress. But I also have just not well formed ideas in here as well.
Yeah.
Anything that I find interesting or I think might lead somewhere or I think is a piece to a greater puzzle, I write those thoughts down. I think of the mind as like a cup with a limited volume, and paper is extra cups you can put your thoughts in before they evaporate and disappear.
All right. So it's a So then, but basically, what you're saying is that it's a combination of both.
Theological and secular thought experiments.
Okay. So now, one thing that we had gone over that I thought was pretty fascinating that I would share with my viewers here was what you had written on life. And so long as Sebastian is willing, I'd like to do some more of these videos. So
Absolutely.
you had written, you kind of broken it down a little bit in life. So what we've got is the meaning of life. Would you like to expand on what you see as the meaning of life?
Yes, I prayed to God for the answer to this because I couldn't figure it out, and I feel like it's foundational to being able to relate properly to a lot of other aspects in life, such as what our duties are, what our responsibilities are, and how we should live. But what I came up with is that no man ever took his own life, and I don't mean gave, I mean took his own life, except that he couldn't imagine getting any more worthwhile satisfaction from his experience. For example, Saul in the Bible, when he realized the armies were coming, he wasn't going to be able to get any more worthwhile satisfaction from his life. In fact, he expected some really bad things were about to happen. That's the moment when he took his life. So the only thing that really gave meaning to his life up to that point was the idea that there was some sort of worthwhile satisfaction to be gained. So the meaning of life must therefore be to seek satisfaction with your experience. And I believe that the Bible is God's wisdom telling us the best way to get satisfaction from life. And again, we don't always understand all of God's law. In fact, we find some of it hard to accept, but we don't have the wisdom that God has. We haven't had the time to think these things out like God has.
Right.
But meaning of life is to seek satisfaction with your experience. And that's different than the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to glorify God. And you can demonstrate that with a simple thought experiment. For example, if a carpenter makes a chair, if a carpenter makes a table, he's doing that for his own pleasure. He's doing it to serve him. If it's true that God made man, then God made man for his own pleasure to glorify God.
Right.
So therein the purpose and the meaning of life are two different things.
Right. So the clear difference between the meaning of life and the purpose of life, which I have to admit, I hadn't really thought that there was a difference between meaning and purpose. I assumed that was just synonymous.
Right, and the reason that they're different really lays in the semantic difference between what meaning is and what purpose is. So, in order for something to have meaning, that is what gives it intrinsic value.
Right.
So, you could say that the thing that really gives life meaning, and this ties into the whole idea of getting satisfaction from your experience, is loving God. Because I think that only through honoring God does God allow things in your life to line up in such a way that they give you satisfaction. It's sort of like if you are a bad child, your parent can't reward you with taking you to the movies. In order to get real satisfaction from your life, or the most satisfaction from your life, you have to honor God so that He can bless you.
Right.
Does that make sense? So it really just boils down to the semantics of what meaning is and what purpose is why the meaning of life and the purpose of life are two different things. Again, in order for it to have meaning, it's what causes it to make sense or be sensible. What makes life sensible? And it's the idea that God loves us and He wants us to have a good experience. He doesn't want us to be in pain. Right. If you love someone, you want good things to come unto them.
Right. Yeah. That's very good. It's very good. For us individually, if whether it be myself or one of my viewers here, if one of us were to ask, if we were to go and find our individual purpose in life, what would you advise? What would you say to that individual if they said, Sebastian, I want to find my purpose in life? What would you say?
Well, there's a few different theories on this. Some people think that you make a plan with God before you come here. I've known Mormon friends that say that there's a pre-knowledge that you forget or something like that, which I don't necessarily subscribe to the Mormon faith. I'm a fundamental Christian. But I think there's something to be said about God saying that He knew you in the womb before you were born. Right. So if you have a purpose, it is to glorify God, but I believe it's to glorify God in such a manner that it fits your particular skill set or calling or interest. God can use you no matter what it is. In fact, God has even used wicked people without their knowing or against their will in order to complete His agenda. Right. So if you're looking for what your calling is or what your purpose is, it's going to be to glorify God no matter what it is, but I think that God will meet you halfway or pick up one corner, so to speak.
Right. That kind of touches, you didn't say it, but it kind of touches a little bit on God's will, which I had spoken about in one of my vlogs. Trying to think, I think it was the 15th, the vlog on March 15th, but was the will of God and the will of God in our life. And I had spoken about how, and I use this to kind of build into the will of God, is that in philosophical terms, you have fate and you have destiny. And many people believe that fate and destiny, not really understanding what they are, that they are the same thing, and that they're not. And that fate is that if you're fated for something, or fated to do something, that it doesn't matter where you go or what you do or what choices you make, you will always arrive at that destination. You're fated to be there. Whereas with destiny, you have, and this is essentially what God's will is. If you add God to the equation of destiny, you get God's will. So destiny is you're destined for something. Now you can embrace your destiny and pursue your destiny to fulfill it, or you can reject your destiny and go your own way. And so it's the same with God's will. So as I didn't really intend to talk about God's will, but this is really good. So then, our purpose in life, if our purpose is to be obedient with God, and then we must then contemplate what is God's will, and to be able to discern God's will.
I think of it this way. A philosopher is somebody that tries to discern and understand why God's laws are the way they are, or someone that seeks after the mind of God. Right. Just like someone who gives, I would say, searches after the heart of God. somebody who gives obviously loves. They're trying to make good come unto others. And I would say an astronaut is someone that seeks after the magnitude of God because they want to see how big the universe is, the sandbox that God has. Does that make sense?
That is, it makes perfect sense. That's amazing.
So when you talk about someone not fulfilling their destiny or acting contrary to God's will, I subscribe that human beings have free will. And that goes back to the Garden of Eden when God commanded us not to eat of the fruit of good and evil. I think that there was a little bit of a sadness for God because he knew he couldn't interfere with our free will, and that's why the tree was there in the Garden of Eden. So we could take the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, but he knew it would be better for us not to. Right. But yet it was still there because God was not going to interfere with our free will. So if you act contrary to God's will, I don't think he's going to bless you as much, depending on how righteous or unrighteous you are. But going back to the story of Jonah, he didn't want to go, and God had him swallowed by a whale and belched on the shore there to go do his will anyway. Yeah. Because he was stubborn.
Yeah.
And
a counterbalance to that, and I actually spoke about this also, is the story of Abraham and Isaac. Is that he was obedient to God, and God had commanded him to sacrifice Isaac, and he was obedient knowing that Isaac was the child that was promised.
Yeah. Man, I would hate to be put in that situation.
That would be a horrible situation. So, the value...
That would be hard for me.
The value of life.
The value of life. Okay, this moves away a little bit from theology, or at least I haven't found a way to sort of tie it to theology. But based on the idea that we have free will, the value of life is that you have a certain amount of time in this world to apply your will toward accomplishing different aims, whether they be good or evil.
Right.
That being said, I subscribe, and I think it was Kant that said this, that the only real virtue is a good will. If you're intelligent or beautiful or mighty, you can use those things, which are, I guess, considered classical virtues in the Greek, in the Greek philosophy, for good or evil intention.
Right.
So I think the only real virtue is a good will. So the value of life is that you have a certain amount of time in your life to make good come unto others, or to make good memories, or to bear good spiritual fruit, like to teach people how to love or how to accept themselves, or to find value in desiring righteousness.
That is very
fathering is a huge part of, or even mothering is a huge part of the value of human life, because you're passing on knowledge at a shortcut from what a person who is fatherless or motherless would have difficulty arriving to on their own, like as far as their own discernment or being able to have their own experience and arrive to the conclusions of those principles. You're teaching principles as a father or a mother, and giving someone an easier way to go where they don't have to go through so much muck in life in order to realize the importance of those principles.
Right. All right. So, Sebastian, in conclusion, when we speak of the meaning of life, the purpose of life, the value of life, the virtue of life, if you were to sum all of this up into one like a simplified means, if you could do that for our audience here, if you were to simplify all this together and say just a few sentences.
I would say that God's highest principle is love, and that I would use Jesus Christ as a testimony to that, because God gave His only begotten Son, because He loved us so much. And Jesus said it best when He said to love thy neighbor as thyself, and to love thy God with all thy mind, heart, and soul.
Yeah.
Or was it body? I don't remember his exact...
I think it was mind, heart, and body, I believe. But
so
I could be wrong. I'm not a Bible scholar.
God's highest principle is love, and because of that, we should love our neighbor as ourselves, and we should love God with everything we are. We should reciprocate God's love.
We should, absolutely. God is worthy of love and worship, absolutely. So, Sebastian, thank you for for coming over here today and sharing your wisdom with me and my audience. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That being said, it is the most just thing to reciprocate God's love because God has given more than anyone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So everybody, thank you for watching. I hope everybody has a great day today, that you are safe and sleep well tonight. Remember, God is love. God bless.
God bless.